when they actually spend their time listening to this show. What does it mean? It means we're winning.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. Support this project by going to echoplexmedia.com, clicking the support link at the top of the webpage, and from there, you can make your own decisions. I'm producer Dave. You can find me on Grindr.
And I am Sylph. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social.
Hell yeah. So, I presume you know who Richard Dawkins is.
I do know who Richard Dawkins is, yes.
Do you know who Colin Wright is?
No, I don't.
He is the managing editor of Quillette.
Ah, okay.
So, a phrenologist. Allegedly. Yep. Allegedly, he's a phrenologist. Well, the name of this video is I Sympathize with Trans People, but. So this is going to be great.
Oh, boy.
This is going to be fantastic. Everybody's going to be really glad they fucking... Aren't you glad you showed up this time?
Oh, this is going to be terrible. I just know it. This is going to be our worst episode ever.
So I had found, and I had forgotten to link to it. I linked to it in the docket, and we'll do it some other time or maybe during the post game. I had found a cosmic skeptic, Alex O'Connor, talking to Richard Dawkins about whether or not like the atheist movement created wokeism, and I assumed that was hot garbage. But then I found this, and I was like, "Oh no, this is going to be even better. This is where we're at. This isn't going to be great." So I didn't really, because I'd never seen like Richard Dawkins do this format, and boy howdy, am I glad that I took a look at it, because the first 15 minutes is just like, I can only explain it as like a really bad intro to a live stage show, so we're not going to watch that. People can go and watch that if they want. There's like loud
the first
music.
15 minutes of it?
Yeah, and I figure like,
wow,
unless you like really, really, really like everything about Richard Dawkins, you probably would be put off by that. And so that was a reason I almost decided to run it, actually. But I was like, nah, I was like, this thing's fucking long enough as it is. Let's get to the part. So here's about 15 minutes, 35 seconds in, I guess, is the actual start. And this is not going to be great. This is not going to be great.
Yep.
Richard Dawkins, it is my great honor, and I'm sure he's your hero as well as mine. Please, everybody get up.
No, not really. Oh, look at all them old people.
Richard Dawkins.
Pretty
everybody.
bad when you can just tell from the back of everybody's head that everybody's an old white guy. Oh, come on.
There may have been one lady in there.
Watch this.
Might also been a guy with long hair.
Watch this. The music, dude. The music. It's like the end scene of the epic movie, except it's just some old crotchety bigot walking out.
It's like he's about to go out and score a game-winning home run, but no, he's just about to say something stupid.
Professor Dawkins, it is truly an honor to be here sharing the stage with you. I know you've done a lot of your tours with professional podcasters. These are essentially professional conversationalists. I'm just a biologist, so when I got
You're the managing editor for a phrenology publication.
people on your team saying, would you like your first interview ever to be of your intellectual hero live in front of thousands of people? So I said yes. So here we go. We're just gonna do this live.
Were there thousands of people there?
Introduction.
I presume
Or
they
does he
mean
mean
also
it was
maybe
streamed live?
I presume also they mean maybe it was broadcast on the internet,
Okay.
because there were hundreds of people in the audience. Yeah.
I mentioned
I couldn't hear. I may say I couldn't hear it, but so I won't be able to respond to anything that you may have.
Oh, no worries. No. All
I should apologize for having a cold, by the way. My voice sounds a bit funny, and I hope I won't have a coughing fit in the middle of this.
I'm actually just getting over a cold too, and so is Thomas. So we're all recovering.
This is real great. We're all talking about our illnesses.
Opener, I mentioned the thing that possibly binds all of us here tonight, because you've had such a vast career talking about so many different issues, which is, I think, what binds us is the pursuit of truth, the reverence that we have for what's true. But that also sort of leads to the question is, well, what is truth? And why is pursuing it so important, if not one of the most important things that we can do?
Great. We're already isn't it great we're having this conversation?
What is truth?
I guess it's that which can be verified. I don't know.
Yeah, that which corresponds with reality, I guess. But also, like, they're literally about to talk about a societal construct. Womanhood is not based on anything but society, right?
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but go ahead. We're getting a little ahead
like
of
womanhood and manhood, those are based on society. Like, society decides whether you get to be, quote unquote, a woman or a man, right? And it decides what sort of behaviors it expects from women and men. It's not like
we're definitely getting a
biological
little bit ahead of
reality,
ourselves, but I guess go off.
It's not like biological reality that everyone with two X chromosomes likes Barbie
we're getting a little
dolls.
ahead of ourselves, but I guess that's just what we're going to do. Can we not maybe get ahead of ourselves and let these guys talk?
Okay.
I feel like maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, and maybe we can let these guys talk.
They're getting ready to spew some bullshit.
It's rather a philosophical question, isn't it? What is truth? Unfortunately, in America at the moment, we're confronted with an object lesson in what is manifestly not true. And so I could answer it in a negative kind of way. What is true for me is what is true of the real world. I'm a citizen of the real world. I believe in the real world. And if you take the scientific view of the real world, things work. You get to the moon. You get to Pluto.
We haven't gone to Pluto. I mean, our machines have passed by sort of the orbit of Pluto, but we haven't been to Pluto.
Correct. We've never even sent a lander to Pluto. Yeah.
Also, Pluto did dirty. Pluto's a planet. I don't give a fuck.
History of life. You look at the.
Pluto's a dwarf planet, which is a kind of planet. So yeah.
Great.
Happened. This is all the truth about the real world.
Yes, if you doubt what happens to be true, you can, take a step out of a high story window if you want. You'll quickly learn about the truth of gravity that way. So it's really
Not if there's a balcony.
the thing that stays there even if you don't believe in it anymore.
And also was there before there ever were humans and will be there long after humans have gone extinct.
Yes, it doesn't just rely on our perception.
Yes.
Well, no, but that building wasn't there before humans. Now you're fucking your whole thing up, dude. The building, that wouldn't have been true that if you stepped out of the window of a building, that you would fall to the ground before humans because there wouldn't have been no building.
Yeah.
This is actually probably a good metaphor. That's probably a pretty good metaphor for what we're about to listen to, but I'm just guessing.
Okay, so is science the only way to discover truths about the universe?
I think science is the only way to discover truths about the universe. That doesn't mean it's the only way to discover moral truths, for example. What's right and wrong? What's beautiful? Those are different kinds of question. But to discover the truths about the universe, yes, the science is the only way. If there were a better way, science would adopt it.
I don't think science is the only way. It's just the best way.
Yeah, and he's also like, I don't know. It's like moral truths are part of the universe, I guess. They're just constructed. I don't know. This is going to be dumb because I mean, I already know where this is going, but we're going to let him get there.
I mean, I guess it just depends on what you define as like a moral question. And then there's no scientific way to answer that. So really it's just like, everyone's just making shit up as they go along and, hoping that it works out.
I think I've heard you say before when people talk about a scientific experiment not being perfect, or look at the bad things science has done in the past, and you've said that the remedy for bad science, for a bad experiment, isn't to go ask your priest. It's not to go and throw some guts on the ground and try to read those or something, read some tea leaves. It's really just more science. You don't if you do bad science, the cure is just more better science.
Yes.
Or a fucking different profession, maybe.
Of course, right. And the test of science ultimately would be a repetition of the experiment. And in the case of physical sciences, this is done often. And if you've cheated, if you've lied, if you've done bad work, then it will come out. Science has in place methods of checking, methods of verifying the experiments that you've done, and especially importantly, methods of avoiding fooling yourself. In the case of medical science, this is especially shown in the double-blind trial, where if you're, say, comparing a new drug with a control, and the point about the double-blind trial is that neither the doctor nor the nurse administering the dose nor the patient nor anybody knows which is which of the experimental or the control dose, and that means that you cannot fool yourself. It's very tempting if you're a scientist to want a particular result to appear, and so you could not knowingly cheat, not deliberately cheat, but there are all sorts of subtle ways of cheating. The double-blind trial is the kind of gold standard to prevent self-deception, and science has distinguished itself by putting in place such techniques for avoiding deceiving yourself.
Yeah, because you're the easiest person to deceive usually.
Yeah.
You often are extremely invested in your question. I can remember back in graduate school, you write up your grant proposal, and in some sense you kind of want your cool idea to be true, but you really have to just put your biases aside and just go wherever the data leads you on this, and put in the protocols that you can to make sure that you aren't fooling yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's, science done correctly. At least that's what we should be expecting,
It isn't always possible to do it. I mean, it's all very well to talk about testing a new drug, but testing a new surgical procedure, I can't imagine anyone would want to be a control.
Yeah. So I think we both
The control is usually just
sort of
the older surgical procedure.
Yeah, either that or just no procedure, right?
Yeah. I mean, it would be unethical if we had a treatment, like if we had a procedure that did work and you were telling people like, oh, we're going to give you a treatment and then just like pretend to do that, that would be unethical.
Right. That's why we don't. That's why we don't like give people fake vaccines as part of clinical trials. Like when there's the disease that people need to be inoculated from.
Hank Green just did a video on this, talking about RFK Jr.'s proposal to do placebo trials for vaccines, like specifically the MMR vaccine.
Okay.
Which is unethical.
Not only the best, but the only game in town if you're trying to test truths about the universe. You know, you talked about moral truths, but you know, if we're wanting to know how the universe functions,
yes,
really science is all we have here. But there's a lot of people who try to protect their favorite false comforting beliefs by trying to allude to maybe other kinds of truth. So people may agree with you and they say, yes, truth is the most important thing, but science is merely one of many different ways of knowing. Particularly the cis hetero white patriarchal colonist kind that you're.
Oh no! Oh fucking! Here we go! Here we go!
Wait, who is saying this?
An imaginary person who probably has blue hair and screeches, I suppose.
Okay, he's literally just making some shit up.
Possibly a university student that fucking didn't want to go out with this guy for whatever reason. I don't know. Like,
okay,
here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Like I would say truth is very important, but it's not the most important thing.
Sure. But that's, I mean, they're not even like trying to like have that discussion. And, you know, they're straw personing. They're literally building, he just built a straw person, probably with blue straw, blue hair.
We're increasingly confronted with. Have you confronted people who are trying to push this sort of other way of knowing? I see it mostly in this area of
other ways of knowing.
Like
yes.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the fact that science has been like great, it's a great man of history bullshit. Basically, is how a lot of people used to understand science. When we talk about it's sort of like the idea, and I don't necessarily like this language, but it's like the decolonization of science, where people aren't saying that the results weren't good or that the experiments weren't good because they were, done by some rich, crotchety old white guy. What a lot of people are saying is there are actually probably a lot of people whose names you've never heard of, some of whom are women, some of whom are minority groups who helped with this or whose work contributed to this, who you're never going to hear about because they weren't rich and white, and that's who got written about in the fucking science book. That's what people are saying. They're not fucking saying that you can't do it if you're rich and white. Like this is the like.
Yep.
This is part of like philosophy of science, essentially, which they don't like critical lens as applied to philosophy and history of science is probably what they're going to go after here.
I think also another point that Dawkins is talking about right now, this idea of like there are other ways to know things. It's true. There are other ways to know things. You can't scientifically answer like what is love, right? Or even something simpler than that.
Question.
Yeah, exactly. Even something simpler than that, like what is a wall? You can't scientifically answer that because what about like a cliff face? Is that a wall? It kind of depends on how you define wall, and that's not a scientific answer.
Right, now you're into linguistics.
Yes, into societal constructs of what these things are because we define them by our language.
I've encountered this from time to time. I most recently encountered it in New Zealand, a recent visit to New Zealand, where it is now government policy to import Maori mythology into science classes in New Zealand. And New Zealand children are being taught, on the one hand, the Big Bang and DNA and proper science, what they call Western science, which is just plain science. And on the other hand, they're taught that it's all due to the union between the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. And
no, this is fucking. They're probably like classes about like this is bullshit, right? They're not going into like a fucking biology class or whatever and being told this. there might be parts of the scientific curriculum that bring up like what other people used to believe about it, or there might be like history or anthropology type classes that he's talking about here. They're not doing this in New Zealand. This is bullshit. At least the way he's describing it is not what's happening. They're not learning that the Big Bang was caused by fucking some mythology shit in like a science class. They're just not learning that. This is bullshit. I don't believe this. Do you believe this?
I don't know. Not the way he's describing it. Yeah.
Whatever the local Maori myths are. And this is bending over backwards to respect the indigenous people, which that, of course, is a virtuous thing to do, but it's not science. And I think probably the same thing happens in this country and perhaps more so in Canada.
Yeah, I was going to say Canada is definitely guilty.
Is woke.
There's science museums they have in Canada where they have these indigenous science exhibits where they have these objects where they include warning labels for what they call objects of power. And they're not just talking about the myths behind them and how the people believe in them, but they're literally warning people who go into these museums of the powerful and how to approach them. And even the people after hours who are handling these things.
After hours? What are you hanging out at some fucking... You're not hanging out at the museum after hours. Shut the fuck up. Remember that movie Night at the Museum? I don't even know if that's about this because I've never seen it.
I have, yeah. This sounds like some grade A bullshit, though.
I think
this
it's
sounds like
neat.
Ark Encounter kind of stuff.
I think it's kind of neat, actually. Like if you go to like a history museum or whatever, and it shows like mythological, like sort of old, like mythological. You know what I'm saying? Like you go to like an archaeology museum, or I don't even know, like some kind of cultural anthropology exhibit or whatever, and it shows like old myths, and it's like, who goes there? That's fucking cool. Like the kids love it. It's like going, those pinball machines that yell at you as you walk by, kind of. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, we in the U.S. we literally have a museum designed after Noah's Ark that teaches all Christian mythology.
Yeah, but I don't think that like. So I think these people are trying to say, and I'm guaranteeing they're like grossly misrepresenting what's going on here or whatever. They're basically trying to say like the museum, the United States Museum of Natural History, like its equivalent, right? In Canada is like telling you to be afraid of some fucking artifact that'll burn your hand if you touch it, right? But I think like built into like an exhibit like that is that everybody knows that the thing is not going to like scramble their brain or turn the lunch in their backpack into like a mouse or whatever the fuck it says that it's, right. I think they're like counting on the fact that people know that that's not true, and it's like an entertainment component of the museum. Probably, I don't know anything about the museum they're doing, but I could see that would be fun, right?
Yeah, or more likely, this just isn't true.
Yes.
It's just amazing how some of these myths, they're getting held up in these educational institutions, which are essentially creation myths a lot of the times.
Exactly.
Where they would have no qualms, they would have no difficulty seeing the issue with, Noah's Ark or something. They wouldn't think for a second that they would include something like that in their exhibit. But there's something about, I don't know if it's this overly romanticized view of indigenous cultures where they somehow get a pass on this. Either way, it's playing favorites.
So it sounds to me like he's describing like an anthropology. You know what I'm saying? Like not a science. Like he's not describing like the tech museum or some kind of thing devoted to like the hard sciences. And that's because most museums aren't. There's no fucking. Would you go to the physics museum? I mean, you might, right? But most people are going to go to like the natural history museum, right? Because that's like there's fucking stories and stuff to be told there, right? There's more flavor, more culture there. So I think they're talking about like a museum of natural history or whatever, and they're probably talking. I'm telling you, it's just a cute thing they have in the museum. I'm telling you, I want to go to this museum with the haunted objects, actually.
Yeah, and also it kind of depends on like, what level of museum, what organization put this together. I mean, like I said, in the U.S., we have a museum literally designed to teach you Christian mythology.
But they're saying that, but I guarantee you they're not. They're telling you that this is like the museum of the science museum that is endorsed by the Canadian scientific community or something. They're not.
Okay.
They're not saying that this is a Ken Ham museum or whoever the fuck it is. Is it Ken Ham? I forget whose museum that is.
I think Ken Ham. Yeah.
I don't know. But they're saying that this is supposed to be like a science exhibit, which I'm guessing that it's more like an anthropology exhibit, probably. But
okay.
Regardless, whatever this is, I want to go to the fucking museum with the haunted objects because it sounds like way more fun than the boring ass museum that they hope would be there.
Right. On my flight out of New Zealand, I was on the New Zealand Airways airline, and the literature on the plane talked about the spirits of the ancestors lifting the plane up, that kind of thing.
You know where I go for my science news is the fucking brochure in front of me in the fucking pocket of the seat on the airplane.
Right? Like, who the fuck cares what is on that pamphlet?
The safety one.
Why
maybe
does
you take,
he
maybe
bother?
If you can't hear, maybe you take. If you can't hear what maybe the person, the little PA system's a little squelchy, you can't hear. Maybe take a look at the safety one. Safety first.
Like, why does he bother taking that information and putting it into his brain?
Right. You know who's on the plane? Tourists.
Yep. Yeah, when I went to the Grand Canyon, there was like a bunch of information about like the Native American cultures around the Grand Canyon, and that's fine. Like, it's not anti-science to teach about the cultures that came before in this land. Right?
But if you
to a certain extent still exist in that land.
But even more importantly, if you flew there, you wouldn't be critiquing the information about the Grand Canyon given to you in the in the pocket in the seat in front of you on the airplane. Like,
correct. I would not be critiquing that information.
Ears aren't working.
Newton's laws and Bernoulli's principle.
Yeah, you mentioned, science is what keeps planes in the air. So if they were to start using the Maori myths, I think very soon they'd get a lot of complaints.
But planes be falling out of the sky anyway sometimes.
One thing, and I still see it too, where people want to uphold these other ways of knowing, they often point to science and the mistakes and the flaws. And the fact that science is always kind of changing. What we held to be true 100 years ago is vastly different than what we view the world as today. Why should we trust the scientific method when the conclusions constantly change?
Well, they do change, and it's part of the virtue of science that it knows when to change. And
it doesn't know anything.
Encountered this when it was pointed out wrongly by the leading physicist of the day, Lord Kelvin, that there wasn't enough time for evolution to have occurred because the sun couldn't be that old. He was assuming that the sun was burning, a sort of furnace, burning something like fuel, in which case it couldn't be more than 20 million years old, and that wasn't enough time for evolution to take place. So then science came along later and realized that actually the sun is a nuclear reactor. So science does change. It does make mistakes. But
good. Now do all your anti-vaccine friends and their statements about things that we didn't know during COVID.
Has its own procedures for correcting those mistakes. It's a self-correcting process, self-correcting method, and that's its great virtue. And there are many things which science already knows is true. It's all very well saying, as some philosophers do, that all we have is provisional hypotheses which are yet to be falsified. That's true to some extent, but there are some things that we actually know are true. I mean, we know that the Earth orbits the Sun, for example. That's not a provisional hypothesis that may be falsified.
Yeah. There's a difference between
No, I mean it could theoretically be falsified. It's just incredibly unlikely. Just like one of the possibly one of the most unlikely things to be falsified is the heliocentric model.
In order to falsify that, it would have to basically be like some wildly more advanced civilization just pretending,
right,
fabricating this reality for us.
Which I think some of the weird people that he some of the weirdos that he probably likes probably believe that.
Capital T truth. And then, we do have tentative truths. I mean, I guess you'd have to leave the slightest possibility open for heliocentrism being false. Just if you're sort of a brain in a vat being meddled with or something, there's always, but we could say, these are such implausible, improbable scenarios. We can confidently say that we have maximal certainty in certain things, like, the fact of evolution that change over time. The fact that the sun is the center of the solar system instead of the Earth. So we're not likely to overturn a lot of these main findings. And correct, you can imagine a situation if you never change.
But things generally don't get dramatically overturned anyway. They get modified, and we learn more about things. Like he had to go all the way back to somebody that thought that the fucking sun was basically a wood burning stove. To find something, you know what I'm saying? In the modern times where it's all iterative for the most, it's almost all iterative. We're not overturning. There aren't any, as Peter Thiel would tell us, nothing has happened at all actually since the A-bomb,
Yeah. And for the majority of the history of science, it's been that way. Every year is not some revolutionary event. These revolutionary events come around every 100 years or so.
And we only
depending on what field you're in and all that,
we only realize that they're revolutionary with it a couple decades of hindsight too, most of the time.
Yeah, sometimes you recognize right away, but yeah, most of the time it takes a while for everyone to get on board and catch up.
A lot of these main findings. And
correct,
you can imagine a situation if you never change when you get new evidence in, well, that's unlikely to be correct at all. So science over time, the picture, it starts out very fuzzy, and as it begins to be clearer and clearer, you might pick out things and be wrong at first, but as it gets clearer and clearer, you can start picking out things in the landscape, and it's changing, yes, but it's directional.
Yes.
In that change.
I'm sorry, are they talking to a group of third graders? I'm what is happening here? This part of this discussion really sucks, because this is really basic elementary school shit where I don't.
Yep. Yes, we all agree on the basic idea of science. Yes, let's move on.
I guess we're getting more precise. We used to think the Earth was much, thousands of years, and it went to millions, and now it's billions, and it's unlikely to go back to thousands.
Yes, right.
Anytime in the future here. One thing I think I want to hear your view on, because I think it's standing in the way between a lot of people's objective pursuit of truth, and it has to do with our cultural obsession, and this might just be a Western obsession, with the concept of identity, sort of identifying as...
yes, only people in the West have an identity. That's correct. This is a Western obsession. Who am I and what other people are like me? Fucking that. Nobody ever thought of that before. There weren't even wars ever. What does this guy think every war was fought about? Recently we've been more worried about identity. It's dude, why the fuck, if there was no identity, why the fuck has there always been war?
I mean, if there was a more telling sentence for this guy's obsession with Anglocentrism, I don't know what it is.
But also people like him, he's going to probably do this thing where people are obsessed with identity, but then he's going to say he's going to sort of pretend he doesn't have one.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. As a white, straight, cis European descent male, I don't have an identity.
Or he might say that he doesn't get to have one, right? That society doesn't let him.
He has one whether he likes it or not.
Yeah, he's the editor-in-chief, or he's the fucking managing editor of Killette.
As
I get the feeling that he doesn't like that identity, or he doesn't like the implications of that identity.
But some of my best friends are,
of identity, sort of identifying as things and having that stand in the way between them actually questioning stuff. So, for instance, we're both atheists, we're both evolutionary biologists. That's
okay. So you're the editor-in-chief of a phrenology publication. You have an evolutionary biology degree, but you are not by profession an evolutionary biologist. Richard Dawkins had a long career as his profession was evolutionary biologist. Richard Dawkins is no longer an evolutionary biologist, not by profession. I hate when they do this. By this fucking definition, I am a political scientist. And anybody who's watched and listened to this show or any of my other shows knows that I am not a political scientist. Like, you can figure that out. You're like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Like, I don't like this. No, you're not. The evolutionary biologists are working somewhere, working too hard for far little money and not getting the recognition they deserve. Probably that's what those people are doing. They're professors. A lot of them are like adjunct professors who are in precarious employment positions. Those are working. You edit a race science publication, Colin. You're the editor. You edit a pseudoscience publication, Colin.
Really coincidence. I copied him on both of those things. But I often think that this identity gets in the way of pursuing truth because people are kind of identifying with conclusions. I don't identify as an atheist. I simply don't think the evidence for the existence of God is very
fuck, here we go. God, could we not do that? Shut the fuck up. This is going to be worse than I hate this shit. I don't care about this anymore. And it's guys like Colin Wright and Richard Dawkins and the fucking famous atheists that made me not care about this anymore. I don't give a fuck. Do you believe in God? Okay, cool. Or not? All right. There's much more interesting things to talk about. I'm not convinced. Sure. All right. Good for you. You figured out the answer to the dumbest fucking question in the world. Congratulations. As people I've been talking about, I'm a little punchy this week. Sorry, everybody.
In terms of the importance of questions, that question is very low on the importance scale.
Don't think the evidence for the existence of God is very convincing. I don't identify as an evolutionary biologist. I just went to school and got that particular degree and practiced it. But a lot of people are putting their identities in conclusion.
See, it's not an identity.
He called himself an evolutionary biologist.
See, I'm telling you, I'm not. It's not my ever. You know who has an identity? Fucking black people, gay people. Not me. I did the work. Didn't take that no work to be black. He called himself
an evolutionary biologist, even though he doesn't work as one.
Right. He's we'll loosely call. I guess a journalist. I guess.
Editor.
Well, that's journalism, right? That's part of journalism is the editorial process.
Okay.
Whether or not we like Killette, that's the industry he's in.
Would you call that an independent journal?
Now I don't want to. Now we're doing fucking journalism identity politics. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Somebody in chat's like, I don't identify as anything. I'm just normal. Oh God. Normie is an identity.
I'm just the default. When you go into the character creator, I'm already there.
Which is perhaps making it difficult to question these without triggering some sort of identity crisis. Do you see that?
Yes, I think treating people as members of a group to which you think they belong rather than as individuals. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of?
We do both every day. All of us do this every day. We treat ourselves this way. We treat other people this way. Otherwise, you wouldn't like your wife more than you like any other woman because your wife is just an identity. Otherwise, she's just a woman and you should just mistreat her like you probably mistreat every other woman you've interacted with.
More than any other person, Dave.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute. We'll get into that later, I'm sure. We're sort of...
maybe even more than any other object? That's terrible.
You treat people because they belong to a certain race or a certain sex or a certain political party rather than treating them as individuals. I think that's a great vice, actually, which is coming to the...
So the problem with this kind of thinking is that, you yourself might think, oh, well, I'm not treating someone different because they're black. Therefore, no one should treat them different because they're black. They shouldn't get any sort of, preferential treatment or differential treatment or whatever by the government But like the reason we have hate crime laws is because people do treat black people differently. And if someone murders a guy just because he's black, that's treated differently than just random murder.
And not for nothing, just because you don't think that you treat people differently because of their identity doesn't mean that they don't notice when you accidentally do. Right.
Yeah. True.
Like when you accident, like I fucking like, oh dude. Okay. So I'll spend just very little time on this. On Sunday, it was my friend's birthday party. It's a friend that owns a nightclub. And because she owns a nightclub in Oakland, she owns two of them. A lot of the clientele were black. Like I was just nice to everybody, whatever. But I definitely saw white people there that were from like the house music scene is like more white. Right. And I definitely saw people like, I guess I would almost call it code switching. Like using what they thought was like more welcoming language or whatever. And I think the black folks there probably noticed that shit. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Probably.
Like,
yeah.
if I noticed it, the black folks there probably did.
Yep.
I just went up. I was like, golly gee, mister, how are you? You know,
well, howdy, neighbor.
But I don't know if I would, because I couldn't see it. I don't know. Maybe if I did that shit either. Right. I hope I didn't, because I do this, right. Like I fucking do this show and it's about that. I don't think I did, but I sure.
So,
but again, if I noticed the other fucking white house music DJs there doing that shit, the fucking black people noticed it.
You might not have noticed that, but you might have, you might not have done that, but like you might have done other things that they notice that you haven't trained yourself to catch yet, you know, because like all of these things are like,
told me, if somebody would have told me one of those things, I've been like, let's sit down, let's talk. I'd love that, you know.
You don't know it. It might not even be bad. It might not be something that they want you to avoid. You know, people they treat other people differently. They treat people differently based on all sorts of things, and color of someone's skin is one of those things that, like, even if you have the best intentions, you're still very susceptible. Everyone is, literally everyone. You, me, all of our audience, everyone on this stage, everyone everywhere is susceptible to treating other people differently because of these like visual appearances or like these ideas of like where they came from, how they speak, you know, how they present themselves.
Socially constructed ideas about people's identities.
Yeah. And like it can be really bad for sure, 100%. And we should try and like stop it when it is bad. But it could also be like relatively harmless.
Or just kind of cringe and harmless.
Yeah. And in that case, like, yeah, you should like try to stop it, but it's not really that big a deal. And if you don't, like, it's not
famously
bad.
On Fox Business, the guy Stuart Varney tells every black person on there that they are his brother, every black man, and he's like trying to be not right. Like, I don't think the dude's racist. Yeah. I actually think he's probably the least racist person on Fox Business because he has black people on his show like regularly. It's just kind of cringe, right? He's like an old man.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is like, you know, he might not even notice that he does that, but like other people notice.
Somebody told him. He's 115 years old though, so he might not remember. Yeah, but like, yeah, we all do this, and like I think the thing that we can do, all of us, is if somebody says, hey, you know, like if it's a black person, you know, like, hey, you only really do this around my white friends. Could you?
Yep.
Maybe you tell. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't worry about it. Who fucking knows? Like, or yep. you only do this around the gay friends I have. Why are you like? It's a little cringe. Like,
yeah. Oh, never mind. I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Like sometimes it's actually like useful. Like, for example, you don't want to treat someone the same regardless of their age. Like a 2-year-old, you do not treat the same as a 45-year-old. If you see a 2-year-old walking down the street alone, like you are going to like call someone to help them like try and find their parents. Right. If you see a 45-year-old walking down the street alone, you're not going to be like, oh my God, I need to call the cops and get this person home.
Right. Like, and if a 2-year-old asks you for a smoke, you don't give it to them.
Depends on the 2-year-old. If they're cool enough, maybe.
Present civilization.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit from the topic of truth. So, well, I guess still sort of dwelling on a little bit. One truth that you've dedicated much of your career to is defending the truth of evolution. Why is it so important for you that people accept evolution? Apart just from being true. I mean, of course, that's a good reason to believe in anything. But what are we depriving ourselves of by failing to understand or accept?
I suppose it's because a living thing is such a stupendously improbable object. It really does demand an explanation, and it's quite extraordinary to me that it took until the 19th century before we had that explanation. When you contemplate any animal, it could be a human or any plant, it could be a...
I feel like this is more the great man of history shit. This is about Darwin. I think people probably... there were people who believed in like some version of natural selection or something like that before the 19th century, right? It just wasn't formalized in the process, in the way that it was formalized through like the origin of species or whatever. I don't know for sure, but I imagine that it wasn't just this guy came up with it out of nowhere.
So there were like kind of like these ideas floating around of this idea of heredity, because obviously, things inherit the traits of their parents, and like explanations of that. And Darwin actually wasn't even the only person to come up with evolution through natural selection. I can't remember what it was. There was another scientist who, like, at the same time as Darwin, independently came up with the same theory.
Let me guess, he was less rich.
I think Darwin published it first.
Oh.
So I think that's why. But like, yeah, the ideas weren't like out of left field. They were just a continuation of the previous ideas. But they were like, impressive.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying
not
that.
to say Darwin's
that,
like the greatest scientist ever, but he's still a great scientist.
I'm just saying that this is great man of history shit, and it's like usually incorrect, even for something like the origin of species. It's usually incorrect, or at the very least incomplete.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is Darwin actually had the funds to do all these experiments,
and possibly before that kind of name recognition to get it out there for other people to see.
Yeah. But yeah, it used to be, if you wanted to make these kind of discoveries, you had to have absolute fucking mountains of money to do this kind of research. Still is. We went through a phase where it was much easier to do research without a whole lot of money. And now we're kind of at a mix between the two. Some research is pretty easy and some research takes mountains of money again, because you have to build a large hadron collider, which is a $20 billion machine.
Redwood, and the sheer complexity, the beauty of it, the elegance of it, the fact that it has design written all over it, screams out for an explanation. And it's beautiful. The explanation that we have is wonderful. And we owe it to Darwin and others, and Wallace.
Shit.
Yes.
Thank you for fucking... Whoa, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm surprised. You don't got to really hand it to Dawkins, but at least he's like, and others. And he mentioned somebody.
Yeah.
Someone in chat mentioned.
Wallace. That's who I was talking about. The other guy who independently came up with the idea of evolution through natural selection.
Successors. It's astonishing that it had to wait until the middle of the 19th century until we had this explanation. And I think it's such a beautiful fact that we can actually explain this otherwise mystery of the complexity and elegance and design of life. So I've devoted my life, I suppose, to expressing that wonder at this fact that we can explain this fact. So I can't imagine not wanting to spend my life doing that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's what got me into, I think, evolutionary biology as well. Just the way it sort of eats through these old beliefs. It turns what may seem miraculous into something that's tangible that you can actually wrap your brain around. It's always really difficult to wrap your brain around things like deep time, but you can do your best. And
it's an astonishingly simple idea. I mean, Darwin's idea is really very, very simple. If you express the power of a theory as that which it explains divided by that which you need to assume in order to do the explaining, it's a colossal ratio, because what it explains is everything about life. The complexity of life down to the cellular level, down to the biochemical level. It explains everything. And yet the theory itself is ravishingly simple.
Yeah, it's a fundamental.
That was well put.
We are.
I gotta say.
Every cell.
Yeah, but it doesn't really explain the biochemistry of it, because that's not evolutionary biology. It doesn't explain.
It explains the diversity of life.
Hold on, science teacher. It doesn't explain how, right? It doesn't explain how these things happen, right? That took a little longer to get like ideas about like how like the mutations might occur, right? That wasn't baked into the theory. It's just that the mutations existed. Now we have now evolutionary biology and other fields of science have more information about how mutations occur, like particularly like the mapping of the genome helped like with more explanation of that, which certainly came after the theory of evolution through natural selection. So
it did predict something like mutations in a molecule like DNA, though.
Oh no, it talked about mutations. It just didn't. I don't know. I don't want to quibble too much here, but it didn't. It wasn't about the molecular biology really, because that when he was doing that field didn't exist in the way.
Yeah, we didn't know about DNA. If we had known about DNA, we probably would have known about evolution already.
Everything about us has evolved through this unbroken chain since billions of years ago. And so one reason that I'm captivated by the topic too.
I don't like this idea that it's an unbroken chain. Because evolution, so like you and me and him,
it's a tree,
like
not a chain.
Yeah, like all of us have ancestors going back to the beginning of life. But think about all the people who don't have kids.
Well, right. It's a tree.
Think about all
it's a tree,
animals.
not a chain. That's what I'm saying. It's a tree. It isn't like a line, right? In fact, that's like the criticism that the creationists have. They're like, well, why still monkeys?
Yeah. Because they're on the branch over there.
Denying something that is really so fundamental to who we are as a species, as mammals, as living organisms, you can't really operate too far in the world basing your views on something that is just so fundamentally wrong to the core. I mean, we can see this in medicine. If we base medicine on the idea that we were specially created, that's probably not a good way to go. So there's many.
This is bull. You can fucking believe that we were created by fucking God and be just perfectly fine at doing medical research. This is bullshit. Yeah. Because by the time you get to like medical research, especially in modern times, you're not like going back to an amoeba. Right? It doesn't matter. You don't have to go. You're not doing that. You're not going, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where any of it came from, actually. If you're doing medical
Dave,
research.
Are you saying that you can believe in both God and germs at the same time?
Yeah, you could even think that God created the germs and make a major breakthrough in healing a disease, actually.
I think that's news to this guy.
Practical reasons also to believe, or to have people accept evolution as well.
Yes, I suppose it was possible to be a doctor before Darwin. There probably were some quite good doctors, including, by the way, Darwin's father and grandfather.
But those were the only ones.
But yes, if you haven't the foggiest idea why we exist, why anything exists.
No, we don't have the foggiest idea why anything exists, actually. I reject this notion like outright that we know why there is something instead of nothing. And I also question whether or not it would be possible for there to be nothing, because how would it even be there?
Yeah.
Like, this is philosophical now. These are philosophical questions, because we're not going to. If there was nothing before there was something, well, then how would we even fucking find out about it? Can't find out about, like, you know what I'm saying? Like you start to like think and talk in circles because it doesn't make any sense, but that's fine. And I like
if there was nothing before something, then there was time before something, because before means that there was time there. Right?
It does rather hamper you, I think.
Yeah, it also addresses, I think, maybe like no other science. Astronomy might get close, but some of these big existential questions of existence, like if you have a penchant for big philosophical questions, who we are, where do we come from, where we're going, why do we behave this certain way? I mean, evolutionary biology really gets as close as you can to real tangible answers.
It was these sorts of considerations that led me into biology in the first place. Yeah. Most of these students that I've taught, if you ask them why they came into biology, it would be that they were naturalists, that they were like Darwin. I mean, they were bird watchers or bug hunters or botanists. But I wasn't like that. I was never much of a naturalist. It was always these existential questions that drew me into the subject.
Yeah, I find the same thing for myself. I used to go on these birding tours. I took a bird class when I was at UC Davis, and I thought it was actually quite torturous being in the car when everyone would be so obsessed with the next bird that they would go to, and then in 10 minutes looking at that, and then we'd move on.
Why were you doing bird watching from a car? You wouldn't go on you drive to the place to do the bird watching, right? Like you're not going to see that many fucking birds just going to fucking fly up. A bird you haven't ever seen before is just going to fly up to the window of your fucking Ford Fairlane. No. I mean, this is again a small thing to quibble about, but it just seems like this is a story that didn't happen, right?
A minute later, we'd see the same bird, and we dwell on that same bird for another 10 minutes. And it was just like that. I was like, can we just see it?
I've come round to that. I mean, I quite like doing that, but
maybe I will too.
But I'm not good at identifying. I'm hopeless at actually knowing which bird is which.
Yeah, that's kind of like the stamp collecting version of science.
I'm really good at telling whether something is a bird.
Well, good for you.
I'm nearly 100%.
You might see a bat from far enough away and think it's a bird. That's why you said nearly.
Yeah, that's 100%. Why I said nearly 100%.
All the naturalist stuff, but yeah, I was more into it for the philosophical reasons. You've spent a lot of time debating creationists and intelligent design supporters. The creation ID versus evolution debates seem to have kind of fallen off, at least since. Yeah,
then you all started then you're like, oh well, we can't do this anymore. We're not getting any traction on this. Let's start trying to figure out which race is stupid.
Least to God delusion.
Why are all these women at our conference, and why are they complaining that we're harassing them?
Likely, probably due to big court cases like Kitzmiller versus Dover, and also probably people like you who've just devoted your career to writing books, demolishing some of these bad ideas. But I can't help but feel, and maybe I have no data to support this whatsoever, it could just be that I'm too much on Twitter and X, and ever since Elon bought it, there's been a sort of a demographic shift, but I get this growing sense that...
I'd like to hear about the demographic shift that happened on Twitter after Elon Musk bought it.
The evolution wars are going to spark up again. Maybe not right now, but the next 5 years. Do you have that sense at all? Or is this just me being overly paranoid?
Well, I hope you're wrong about that. I was not actually involved in the Kitzmiller case, and I met one of the lawyers on our side, and after he had a long conversation with me, he said, well, thank goodness you weren't called as an expert witness on our side.
Would you have been too strident?
Well, the reason was...
the lawyer's like, you're an asshole. Right? I think that's what the lawyer was like, oh, God. Whoa. Whoa. Look at the time. Time is money. Gotta go. Lawyers, you're picking up the check, right?
Was to, as it were, reassure religious people you can still keep God and be an evolutionist. And I would have been.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. If you believe that God created the universe and that everything after that just happened because of the fucking properties of the universe that God created. Well, I don't know how the fuck the universe got here, and neither does Richard Dawkins. And so, yeah, you could totally think that God created the universe, and then that everything after that happened through like natural processes, and be a hell of a fucking evolutionary biologist. I don't see any contradiction.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say it's better to be that than to believe in, the creationist ideas. So I would rather someone believe in God and also evolution than believe in God and creationism.
Well, creationism would just mean that snap, the universe got here, and that's sort of what the Big Bang says anyway, I think.
Well, creationism is following the creation story in the Bible.
Right.
So God created humans on like I guess the days don't really matter, but the story of the Bible, the story of creationism in the Bible does not agree with evolution.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. Also, like the drawings of it show 2 male lions getting on Noah's Ark, so that's pretty well.
Given the lie to that, and would have probably lost the case. Therefore,
Yeah. There's a time and place for everything. Yeah, you got to take the little victories where you can, So, I agree. One reason I think that I'm concerned about this resurgence, again, I'm too online for this stuff, but the former Fox News host and political commentator Tucker Carlson, he recently went on Joe Rogan, and he talked about. I like Joe. But
gotta make sure we kiss the ring.
They both have the biggest podcast ever. I mean, sometimes Tucker's is the number one podcast, Joe's is routinely the number one. But Tucker said some insane things about evolution. Were you aware of the things that he said?
I did read about it. I've forgotten what he said. Perhaps wisely.
Well, I have it written down right here, and I'd like to read that to you. So I was one. It was a very
out of all the crazy shit that Tucker probably said in 3 hours on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it's a little bit wild to be like, well, the stuff he said about evolution, actually, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can imagine like the fucking insane shit that he said on there, and then just picking out the evolution stuff. It's a little weird, little new atheisty.
It'd be good to hear your response to these, because it's just ludicrous to me that these arguments are still around, given your work and how much progress.
I don't know if you've noticed, but there's like some blue light that's shining on their faces, and it's very distracting.
Oh, I see this on a lot of these things. I think they have like par cans, like I have, I think, but there's something with the camera where it like makes almost like a shimmer on them.
Okay.
Here's what Carlson said. He said, this is after Joe sort of mentioned evolution, and they had a quick back and forth, like, is it real? He said, you can measure adaptation, but there's no evidence that evolution. In fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution, as articulated by Darwin, it's like kind of not true. Then Rogan said, in what sense? And then Carlson responded, well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single-cell organism, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. There's a ton of record of adaptation.
There would be a fossil record of that one single-cell organism that started life?
Well, right, but I'm not here to argue with what Tucker Carlson, with what he's telling us Tucker Carlson told Joe, right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's an insane thing to say. So, yeah, of course it was Tucker Carlson.
Have lots of dogs.
I mean, not of course, but of course he said that.
Litter to litter, but there's no evidence at all, none, zero, that people evolved seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's not a chain in the.
Well, that's because it wasn't This is I don't. We're not.
Yeah, it had a lot of.
We're not doing like a third grade explanation of natural selection. I just don't want to do it.
I got a big seam right down my ass.
At all.
I'm pretty sure most of my ancestor did too.
Because
I got a seam down there too, and Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, fucking Colin Wright, and Richard Dawkins can all kiss it.
Because that theory of adaptation is clearly true, but Darwin's theory is totally unproven. That's why it's still a theory, almost 200 years later. So there's, soak that in for a second. I think there's three main claims in this. So one is that we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. It'd be interesting to know who we are. But is the theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin kind of not true? I mean, come on.
It's wonderfully true. I mean, it's being verified daily, weekly, all the time, ever since Darwin's time. The evidence is absolutely massive. And
this is like really weak sauce. They're like dunking on Tucker Carlson's creationism crap on like the Joe Rogan podcast. This sauce is incredibly weak. Can't even taste it. Just taste. You put it on your chicken, and the chicken just tastes like chicken.
Does he think we evolved from an amoeba?
Apparently, yes. Yes.
Well, that's about 100 years out of date.
Yeah, I haven't. I was at a graduate school in 2018, so I haven't been there for about 8 years now. But I think they probably still believe in evolution. A lot's changed, perhaps. So the second thing, yes, he said we emerged from a single-cell organism, and there would be a fossil record of that. But there's no evidence at all that people evolved. Maybe this is a weasel word. Seamlessly from a single-cell amoeba. He seems to be looking for a seamless.
Well, you would not expect to.
I mean, technically we didn't. We evolved from two because we're eukaryotes.
Well, and more to the point, it's not seamless. There's fits and spurts and things. Certain organisms made it, certain died off. Like it's not a line. It's a tree, and the branches end, and like this is just.
Yeah,
I can't believe
it is quite seamful, actually.
Right.
So, ancestor. Anyway,
it's a lot of excuses you're making.
We're lucky to have fossils at all. I mean, it's an extremely fortunate accident that fossils do exist. If we had no fossils at all, if there wasn't a single fossil anywhere in the world, the evidence for evolution would be absolutely cast iron. We do not depend upon fossils.
And plus, if we needed to have this seamless, array perfectly leading up. I mean, you mentioned that this isn't what we would expect. Things are difficult to follow.
Oh, they're going to dunk on the God of the Gaps argument. That's hell smart.
We have as many fossils as we do. But if your standard is seamless transitions, like, okay, let's see.
I mean, I'm a DJ. Those are my standards.
Somewhat of an array, but you have a gap there, which you're going to have. If you fill in that gap, if you do the research and you find out where you need to dig based on the plate tectonics, what rock formation based on geology. Let's say you find that transitional fossil.
Then there are two gaps.
There's two gaps.
Yes.
I told you they're hella smart. They're gonna dunk on the God of the Gaps argument. Good for them.
This makes it worse for us. So we shouldn't.
If we really did have a seamless transition, if every species that ever lived was preserved in the fossil record, it would be a remarkable thing.
Where we wouldn't have any place to put all of them.
Impossible to give species names to all these fossils because they would seamlessly grade into each other. It's only the fact that almost everything has gone extinct that enables us to give separate names to animals at all.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't expect to find that exact through line through time too, because the branching pattern of evolution. You're probably going to find sister species that are in the fossil record. So, I mean, you can only make this claim for wanting this.
Yes, there are very few cases where you actually do have a progression in the fossil record that you can see completely seamless. I think there's one case in diatoms, single-cell plants, where I think it's in Yellowstone. There are, if you take cores samples down through Yellowstone mud, you find an actual seamless transition as these diatoms evolve. But that's very rare. Normally we have one here, one there, and there are big gaps between them inevitably.
Okay, and then Tucker's final thing. Darwin's theory is totally unproven. That's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later.
Oh, now we're going to explain the difference between a scientific theory and then when you're stoned in your dorm room and you're like, I have a theory. We're going to have to explain that now. Great. This is fucking galaxy brain. This is like, I'm kind of shocked that they've spent now 45 minutes
not even talking at all about like what the title of their video is.
We've got to stop calling it a theory.
To be fair, the first 15 minutes was this annoying, like, musical I can't even explain the first 15 minutes.
What should we call it?
It's a fact. The word theory is misleading. Scientists sometimes say that the word theory is used in a different way. In popular culture, theory means...
Scientists, you know that I'm not even a scientist, and I didn't sometimes say that. We know this. Yes.
Yep.
Like hypothesis. And scientists use it in a different way, but I prefer to abandon the word theory altogether in this case and say evolution is a fact.
I agree. The word is abused way too much. So yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
So after Tucker made these comments, the internet seemed to blaze with people who were emboldened by these claims to just follow these ideas, and my DMs were just filled with people going crazy.
Nobody DM'd me about this at all because they know that I would block them.
How does it make you feel that these arguments, which have been, you've personally debunked in all of your books countless times, they still persist? I mean, their arguments, I guess they're so anti-evolution, their arguments haven't even evolved at all either. They just keep using the...
Well, there's nowhere to go from God.
Got him.
They were emboldened. Because...
Oh, wait, no, their argument did evolve. Remember when it went from God did it to it's like God helped, essentially? Remember?
Yeah. But I guess that wouldn't be an evolution denier?
Yeah,
I mean, kind of.
This is all dumb, though. This is all. You know who would have loved this? Me in 2006.
Yep.
I'll cop to my part in all this.
You know who wouldn't have guessed that they would still be talking about this 20 years later?
Not me in 2006. Well, I'd guess Richard Dawkins' crusty ass would have been dead.
Yeah.
Tucker, what's his name? Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson.
Don't pretend you don't remember Tucker Carlson's name.
Is some kind of authority, is he? I mean, some kind of expert?
Oh.
Yeah.
He wears a bow tie. Well, he used to.
So that's what we're dealing with right now. So maybe it's just this microcosm of the online world, but I do suspect we're going to have another evolution war, and I guess I'll have to. I know what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now.
Editing an article about the differences in intelligence between race, like you've been doing for a long time at Killet.
You weren't always battling. I mean, I guess you were for a long time. Creationism and ID. Now, I guess a little bit more of the woke activist persuasion, which we'll get into a little bit later.
No, do it now. Do it now. This part sucks.
But you were actually a practicing evolutionary biologist, writing peer-reviewed papers. The debates that you had when you were an active evolutionary biologist, I think these were some of the most fascinating debates ever. It wasn't so much the big questions and like, oh, look at evolution. It's amazing, the apparent design. I mean, that's cool too.
I think if we need to and you're okay with it, we should probably keep watching this in red light and put that out for free.
Yeah, we'll do a freebie.
Volleys between, I would say, you and now the late Daniel Dennett, and then on one side, and then Stephen Gould and Richard Lewontin on the others. I suspect the audience might be a little familiar with these because you do allude to the debates around group selection and individual selection. They're a little esoteric, but I think they would be of wide interest when people understand these. Can you kind of just explain, I guess, very briefly, the main disagreements you had with some of these other giants of evolution, the battles that you used to do?
Stephen Gould was a brilliant communicator, and I think many Americans learned what they know of evolution from his essays, which are beautifully written. He, like me, he was filled with wonder at the living world. His main disagreements that we had, well, I suppose, punctuated equilibrium, the theory that he put forward with Niles Eldridge, the belief that as you look at the fossil record, you get apparent jumps. And they argued that these jumps are real and they are not to be glossed over. We're just sort of not just missing data. They really are jumps in the fossil record. They believed that there were periods of stasis where no evolutionary change happens, and then a sudden jump to a new form. Now, Gould, especially in his later writings, I think confused three different kinds of jump, which had nothing in common with each other except they were all jumps. And so they had a kind of poetic resonance with each other. The three were macromutation, that's to say a single mutational step where a child is radically different from its parent. So that's the first kind. The second kind, it was...
Hopeful monster?
Yes, hopeful monster. That was Goldschmidt's term. The second kind of jump was the result of mass extinction. So you had... the dinosaurs went extinct, and immediately that opened the way for very rapid evolution by mammals. And the third kind of jump, which I think is the main one that Eldridge and Gould originally intended, was followed from the dominant theory of speciation, the dominant theory of the way new species come into existence, which was geographical. The idea is that you have a population of animals, say, on the mainland, and an island, and some of them got to the island, and on the island they evolved in a different direction, perhaps because of random drift, perhaps because of different selection pressures on the island. And then if they came back to the mainland later, they would by then be different because they'd evolved differently on the island. So it would look like a jump. It would look like an evolutionary step change because all the evolutionary change had taken place on the island. And if you dig down on the mainland, it appears to be a sudden jump. Well, those are three different kinds of punctuation, which I think Gould especially muddled up in his later writings. He also espoused the idea of multi-level selection. Selection not only works at the level of the individual, but at the level of the group. He thought...
At least this is a little more in-depth than... Aren't we also glad that science works?
Treat natural selection as choosing between individuals within a species. He thought you also had to consider selection between groups, between species. He wrote a fascinating book called Wonderful Life, which I would criticize.
Which is different than the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
It was about the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion was a period in the Cambrian era about 550 to 520 million years ago, where, according to Gould, a whole new flowering of different body types, different phyla, suddenly arose, again as a kind of jump in evolution. And I think what's wrong with that, it's a beautiful poetic image. It grabbed people.
Suddenly in the terms of like in 10 million years.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know enough about the people involved here and like what they believed, but I don't know. It seems like the thing he said about the island makes total sense. Like if he's saying that that's like a bad thing that the other or something he didn't agree with, the thing about the island makes total sense. Not that I know enough about it to like fucking have any more input than that it seems to make sense. But these seem like they're not really disagreements. I don't know. Because you're going back all these millions of years and shit. And so like, and then you're compressing time down again. Like you have to have this discussion. Otherwise we'd be talking about it for millions of years. Like, you can't really do it.
When someone says suddenly in the context of evolution, they don't mean like one day. They mean like within a few million years.
Right. relatively quickly would be a better way to.
What's wrong with it is that he was kind of implying that because in that period of the Cambrian, many of the phyla, the major animal groups, arose at that time. It looks like a jump, but that's arguing with hindsight, because
you can't go to that time period, so you have to.
They recognize these different animals as different phyla by reference to their modern successors. It's as though a gardener were to look at a tree and say, isn't it funny? This tree in recent years has only put forward new growth at the twig level. There have been no new major boughs. Well, that's obviously stupid. I mean, of course there'd be no new major boughs. The major boughs had to start a long time ago. I think that's the error that Gould made in Wonderful Life, which, if he didn't make that error, he, as it were, laid himself open to other people jumping on that error.
Yeah, he did have that obsession with all the jumps being real. And I remember your criticism you had is you said, he was criticizing you, trying to say that you're for this gradualism, but your response was that, well, gradualism doesn't mean constant speedism. You can still have something that appears very rapid, in a geological timescale. We could still be talking about millions
an old
of
chap
years.
of mine. I had a quip.
The intermediates aren't there, but about fossils are very difficult to come about, and so you can see these apparent jumps when maybe they don't actually exist in real life. And
by the way, Darwin said the same thing.
Yeah, he was dead set on the jumps being very real, and I don't think he was very convincing of that. I want to touch on your new book.
Here's a good time to fucking put a fork in this one, because we're about an hour and a half in, and I feel like his new book's going to be where it gets a little spicy. I like your idea. Of the worst fucking episode of the IDT that we've done in a while. It was fun making fun of him explaining to you like you're fucking 7 what natural selection is. Well, we'll give the rest of the show out as a freebie, and maybe I'll even hack the second part of this out and put it on the podcast feed, because it might be neat also for the people on the podcast feed to like hear the more like sort of informal and more alcoholically lubricated version of the show that occurs.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure that all of that seems to be leading up to this very problematic conversation that they allude to in the title of this episode.
Right. And I think the point of doing all this is right to like sort of what like almost like the opposite of poisoning the well. It's almost like tilling the field, right? Like saying that you like putting out your bona fides as like a science communicator, and even like saying that you were a better science person than this dead guy or whatever. They might even be like completely misrepresenting. But you know what? I whoever this guy, that Gould guy, I bet he didn't spend his the twilight of his life shitting on black people or whatever, right? But you never know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, would you like? I'm going to full screen you. You know the drill.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, live on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you'd like to support us, you can do that at Patreon at patreon.com/Echoplex, or you can do it on our own store, eplex.xyz. If you want to check out our other shows, check them all out at echoplexmedia.com. And if you are listening live, stick around for after the song where we jump into Red Light. And if you're listening on the podcast, we'll have the other half of this available for you. So I don't know if Dave's going to put it right on the end or not. He'll chop off this section if he does, I guess. Anyway, here is... I'm blanking on the song. Boomers by Periscope.
I like how you just lied and said that I would edit anything. We'll see everybody in Red Light.
Also blanked on